Okay, we'll get started. I'm Ed Merks, and with this demo with me is Ike Stepper. Is the audio okay? You can hear in the back? Okay, very good. So today we're going to show you a technology that we've called Oomph. It's an interesting word. Most English native speakers know what Oomph means, but the Germans are like, we don't know what that word means, and the French we don't know how to pronounce that word. But in English, in fact, if you Google, you'll see there's an article from years ago that says Mitsubishi puts more oomph into Eclipse. It's actually the Eclipse car, and it means they made the engine a little stronger, and that's what we're trying to do with Eclipse, is really add a bit of oomph. So to kind of motivate why we did this piece of technology, we're going to kind of walk through a typical scenario. So there's some project you want to work on, we'll call it cool. And maybe it's your own project or it's somebody else's project, but the idea is that you kind of have a blank desktop, you have nothing installed, and you want to work on this project Oomph, and you're quite motivated, so you ask yourself, how do I get started with this piece of technology? So of course, where's the documentation? Thank God there's Google, so we Google that, we search around a little bit, and we find out often there is no documentation, or if it is, it says how to use Cool, but not how to contribute to Cool. So if you're and this is sort of a recurring theme here, you go through these stages and most of these things end up with, I give up, I'm not gonna work on Cool because I can't figure out how to set it up. So assuming that they do have some contributor documentation, and we've got a real live world example here of actual documentation. This is from Lars Vogel. This is how you contribute to the platform. They have a significant amount of documentation to read. And this is, if you saw our speaker's pitch, that was what Ike was showing you. It's not something we made up. You read and you read and you read. And in the end, you're like, are you kidding me? I mean, these are all instructions and we're in the computer age. Why should I read 30 pages of instructions to get started on a project? And often the documentation you find is outdated because projects evolve quickly. So if there is documentation, no one likes to write it, and most certainly no one will maintain it. But of course, you'll often hear, oh, the documentation's in a wiki, you can maintain it yourself. Yeah, that's the first thing I want to do, is maintain some other project's documentation. So, but if you're really, really persistent, then you follow all these instructions and you get the right package of Eclipse, you download it, and then you try to unzip it, and then you're on Windows and, oh geez, unzip doesn't work. It's like a standard newsgroup problem. It's use the right version of zip, then it will work. And then you run it, and oh my God, what Java did it find? And then you have to magically point it at the right version of Java. And then you're not done yet, so now you just have this bare Eclipse with nothing in it. And apparently you need to install a whole bunch of tools to work with this project. So you have to find the marketplace URL, some update site, and wait while the update site loads, and you pick something, and then it's like rinse, lather, repeat. You spend the next half hour downloading and updating and installing tools, and you hope to God it never gets to the point where it says this version is incompatible with something you already have installed. But assuming that you are very persistent and you haven't given up, you'll get all of those different things installed and there won't be any conflicts at the end. So great, now you have an IDE installed and a completely blank workspace. So obviously you want to get the cool projects into your workspace. So now the next step, it's like, where are the Git clones, and does it have a Garrett clone? And for something, I have a script we'll show later, sort of this setup procedure, but I have one for the entire platform SDK, and it involves 27 Git repos. So just finding where all those things are is already a chore. But suppose you do that, or maybe they're really nice and they have a project set file you can import, and then you might say, God knows where my Git clones end up. But you get past that stage as well. And all the projects are in your workspace, woohoo, but they all have exclamation marks and red X's, and it looks like a complete disaster area. So again, you might say, this is just never gonna work. But then they tell you, oh, there's this target platform thing, and maybe you're quite skilled and you know what a target platform is, And maybe they're very nice and they have a target platform file somewhere in some Git repo. So you activate it and you wait another hour for this target platform to provision, hopefully without any problems. And you wonder, why is it downloading so many things again? Are these not the same bundles that I have mostly installed in my IDE? So finally you get that thing. There are no more errors in your workspace. But if you really look closely, there are 10,000 warnings. And you think, really, is the cool projects is not so cool if it's a sea of warnings. And this 10,000 sort of an underestimate. If you look at the platform, it's, yeah, you need to filter the view or it will not populate. So in fact, then you find out if you import the right preferences, you can prefer not to have all of these warnings. So unfortunately, a lot of projects have these sort of instance scope preferences when in fact they'd be better to have project scope preferences so that when you import the project, you have the right preferences already without globally setting them. So that's actually another technology we work on in Oomph. Now you ask yourself, how long did this take? 3 hours is being generous. On some of the customer projects I've been on, people spend 5, 6, a whole day on this setup, and this is a complete total waste of your time. And then the whole point was to contribute to this project, so you try to run the tests, they all fail, you haven't even changed anything yet. And often that's because they expect Linux line endings and you're on Windows, and those things don't play very nicely together. If you do get this far and you actually ignore the fact that the tests you weren't interested in don't pass, you make some change, you commit the code, and hopefully we've hooked it up to Garrett and somebody sees it, you commit that piece of code, and then, yeah, what is this Garrett thing? You need to know where to commit it, and often you look in the staging view, and again, this Windows line ending thing, you have 3,000 files are changed, but you actually only changed 2 of them. Another nasty problem you deal with. But you figure, nothing can stop me. I will commit this thing. And then we get more into the human sort of types of problems of, you commit it. Is anybody really going to look at your contribution? Something our tool can't fix. We need humans at the other end. Or you get whining about you didn't increment some manifest file, something like that. And we have nice tools in Oomph for managing. API tools will manage your major and minor version numbers. The Oomph tools will help you manage the micro version numbers for your maintenance streams and so on. So this is kind of the question you have to ask yourself when you get to the end of this, is if all of these things end in a failure point, how serious are these cool people that they want you to contribute to the project? This is not, you shouldn't expect someone to spend 5 hours going through a recipe to get your project set up. And you think, why do we accept this as our status quo? And I think everyone in the room will look at this and say, yeah, when I work on a project, I have to deal with this. And for some reason, we all accept this as the status quo, and it's completely unnecessary. And the final important note here is more documentation will not solve this problem. We do not want more documentation, and we don't want to maintain it. We want a better alternative. So that's what we need. We need some more oomph. We need some power in Eclipse to automate all of these painful, tedious steps. That's what Eike will explain in the demo.
Yeah, hello everybody. You saw I got introduced already. I realized I had a couple mouse issues here. I hope it works now. Yeah, mostly, okay. So you got an idea about the problem that we tried to solve, and I will quickly guide you through a couple slides to explain how the tool works, our installer tool that we've developed, and after that we'll have a big chunk of a demo of that tool. So the central concept of our tool is a setup task, and we have a number of implementations of this concept. We will see them in action later. These tasks will be executed by a setup engine, and the engine collects these tasks from 3 different places. The first place is you must select a product, a base product that you install that is comparable to downloading an Eclipse package from the Eclipse main download site. And that induces a number of setup tasks. Install plugins into the IDE, configure the Eclipse INI and stuff like that. The second place that provides setup tasks is 1, 0, or more projects that you can select and that you want to have in your workspace. When we say projects here, we don't mean really the technical projects in the workspace, but more like organizational units like EMF or the platform or SWT, so bigger units. And each of these projects, more exactly their streams, so you have to choose, for example, the master branch of EMF, will induce additional tasks that will be considered by the engine. And the third and a very interesting place where tasks are picked up is a file in your user home where especially you can add tasks. And these tasks will be applied to all the installations that you do. And we will see that in a minute. So once the engine has collected all these tasks, it will reorder them according to certain rules. It will filter out some again. And then it will divide them into 2 groups. The first group, we call it the Bootstrap Tracker, because at this point in time, the target IDE that we want to install is not yet there. The bigger number of tasks can't run outside that IDE. It needs the workspace. So a small number of tasks will be executed by the installer itself to bootstrap the IDE. Then the installer will launch the IDE, and at startup time of that new IDE, the rest of the tasks will be executed. That's all I wanted to show on the slides, and now it's demo time. Oh, actually, I forgot one thing. This startup trigger, it executes all tasks at each startup at the IDE, but at any time while you're working with it, you can push a button in the menu bar and re-execute the tasks to make sure that your IDE is up to date.
So the whole description of your project setups can all be centralized. We're generally maintaining them in Git. And so somebody can update that, and all of the members in the team can hit the manual task button, and they will all update their current installations to conform to the latest descriptions.
Okay. So let me switch to the desktop. So you have already seen that our setup engine comes in 2 different forms.
Not plugged in. Quick add power.
So the setup engine will run in the IDE that you will install, but before you have that IDE, you need an installer to install it. And that is an RCP application that you can download at Eclipse. Our homepage, we will show the link later, lists all the different installers for the operating systems and platforms. So this is the Windows 64-bit version here, and I'll just launch it. We just got a nicer logo. It was just approved 2 days ago. So the installer comes up like this, and it is organized like an Eclipse wizard with a few number of pages. Here at the bottom you see a couple of icons that you can click to configure important things like network settings, the identities, SSH identities, for example.
So that's often a problem behind a corporate firewall, that you have proxy settings and things like that that you need to get out through the internet. So those are things you can set in the installer, and the IDEs we install will copy those network preferences to each installation.
And you see in the bottom that the installer itself checks the internet for updates to himself. So it does self-update. You don't have to download it again and again. So the first page is the product selection, as I mentioned. This product catalog that you see here, we generated from the Eclipse packaging project from the real P2 repositories. So any selection that you make here is completely identical to downloading that package from Eclipse.org. In addition to selecting the kind of the product, you can always select the version of it. I'll keep it with the latest one, which is currently Luna, but will soon switch to Mars. A very important aspect for all these installations is bundle pooling. You can imagine the downloading of 800-900 bundles over the internet can take quite some time. And we make extensive use of bundle pools because that speeds up the installations and saves space on your disk. We have noticed that many people don't use bundle pooling. We suspect that there are two reasons for it. Either they don't know about it, or they know about it and they don't trust the bundle pools, because there is some danger with bundle pools. Sometimes it happens that artifacts that you download and place in these bundle pools get corrupt. Often they are not downloaded 100%, and a single such artifact, damaged artifact, can corrupt all your installations that use this bundle pool, and that's of course unacceptable. So we've invested quite some effort to create more trust in the bundle pools. We've created tooling, we've even made it quicker, and I will just quickly show that you can install plenty profiles here that make use of these bundle pools.
We've tested a lot, so there's a long list of them.
And in case you suspect a damage in your bundle pool, you can quickly analyze all the bundle pools. It detects the damaged artifacts, re-downloads them from the internet, and you can just go on. So, of course, if you still don't like bundle pools, you can just switch it off. But especially for this demo, I need the speed. Otherwise, we would sit here and wait an hour to install it. Okay, so I go to the next page, which is the project selection, as you've seen on the slides. And these projects here are Eclipse projects that have provided already setup description files that we hook into our project catalogs. We will soon open a GitHub catalog, and then you can enable the different catalogs here, do searching and filtering. For this demo, we'll select Oomph itself. So we will install a Luna development environment with Oomph in the workspace and the right plugins in the target platform and so on. So I double click it. It's worth mentioning that you can select multiple projects here, which is quite a challenging problem that we solved, because often these projects come with .target files, because in case you don't need that, you don't know that, a target platform is the set of plugins that a project compiles against, but there can be only one such target file active at a time, so it's just not easy to compose workspaces for multiple projects. But with Oomph, we've developed a special target platform implementation, which is a little bit quicker, a little bit safer, and supports composition.
Not just a little quicker, it's like hundreds of times quicker, because it's using the same bundle pool that you've used to install your IDE. So generally 90% of what needs to be in your target platform is already on your machine, so it takes literally seconds.
So just a side note, we will just provision Oomph now into the workspace, but if you want to make your own project descriptions, we have authoring tools for that, which we will quickly demo later. But once you have done such a description, you just drag and drop the file, you drag it and drop it here on the project catalog, and then it will appear under this user category, and you can normally use it with Oomph. So on the next wizard page, we must enter a couple of things that Oomph needs to know, and what these things are depends on the selections that you've done, depends on the products and especially the projects that you've selected. In this case, it only asks me for the name of the installation folder. But that's not entirely true, because we use Oomph for months already, and Oomph records many of the data that we enter. And in fact, if I show all of the relevant data for this installation, you see there is more. We've just entered that before, and the only thing that makes a difference is this here. And many of the other values are like rules that use this value to compute other things. So that means here I enter Oomph because I want to install an IDE for Oomph in the workspace, and proceed to the next page. This is the confirmation page. So the engine has now computed all the tasks that should execute at Bootstrap time. I can select whether I want to do an offline installation or an online installation. Here, offline is good. We don't know how good the network is, and it's a little bit quicker again. So you can also inspect the tasks. That typically makes sense if you know more about Oomph and the particular tasks. Look at all their properties. You see where the workspace will be installed to. But for now, I just go on, and now the engine executes the needed tasks and shows the progress of the installation. And here you see we've tried to make the Eclipse Foundation lawyers happy.
Janet Campbell in particular.
So license confirmation is part of Oomph, but you can say, okay, when I accept the EPL, then I probably do it for all things that have EPL. So remember my choice and don't bug me again about that. Yeah, in the upper part you see the progress in terms of tasks. The currently running task is always selected. And in the lower part, that's obviously a log window. And you see after 46 seconds, the whole IDE is installed with all the bundles that are required for the product and the projects and so on. And
without the delay from him confirming the licenses, generally takes 20 seconds.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of typical behavior. Once you've installed once, all the bundles are on your machine. P2 is very fast, but downloading all those bundles is not. So you want to get them into your bundle pool and reuse them.
So you see here the installer wizard is now already launching the installed product. We just have to wait for that. I can dismiss the dialog here. And in a second the new IDE comes up. Then you will see the setup engine automatically reconciles the list of tasks. This IDE is connected to the set of tasks that we have chosen. And at each startup time, it will reconcile them and execute the needed tasks. So let's have a quick look at the tasks that execute now. In the upper part, you can see that these are preference tasks. A very interesting one is this here. I mentioned our own target platform implementation. And we peeked a little bit at Buckminster for those that know that technology. So instead of listing all the features that we want to install, we also point to our own source locations. There was a git clone task running that has downloaded all the sources of our own project.
So that was a little part that we cheated. We didn't want to wait for the git clone, and SSH doesn't work on this internet, so the git clone was physically present already.
And the engine has seen that and has decided it doesn't have to run the git clone task. So the sources are there, and in this so-called targetlet here, we point to our sources on the disk, and then we only enumerate a small number of our own top-level features. So you see, it's all about Oomph here, no third-party dependencies. And then this target platform implementation analyzes all our projects, sees the dependencies, and resolves the missing things against these P2 repositories in the internet. And then it places the binary solutions into the target platform and imports the sources into the workspace. So with this targetlet, the target platform has been provisioned and the projects will be in the workspace. So the whole thing here, you can see that we have tasks to configure mylin queries, Oomph specific mylin queries, Gerrit queries, Hudson build plans. This is a bad thing, actually. I will show that later in the workspace. So we can configure working sets to organize our source projects with patterns and rules. So the whole thing has taken 31 seconds now. Okay, granted, Git cloning was not part of that. So once I finish, you see a ready IDE to start Oomph development. We have installed several mylin tools into the IDE. We have configured the mylin tools so that we have the queries here, the build plans there. You notice, for example, whenever you install an Eclipse, these progress dialogues ask you to send it to the background. And often I see people who send it to the background again and again. That annoys me typically. So there is a way in Eclipse to configure that, but you have to do it in each new workspace again, right? So let me show you how with Oomph you can configure your machine such that that goes automatically to each new workspace. We have a small toolbar here with just 2 actions. And the second one opens the various description files that this workspace and IDE is connected to. And one of the most important ones is your user file. So let me open that. Again, you see this annoying dialogue, but it will go away in a minute. Actually, not sure if we mentioned that the implementation of Oomph is fully done with EMF. So all these description files that I mentioned are in fact EMF models. And you can use all the Eclipse modeling tools to work with them. So this is a generated editor. Some like it, some not. We will probably improve on that in the future. What you can already do is, from here, we have a recording button. And that opens the normal preferences dialog, because that is what you're familiar with. And I just check this here, always run in background. And personally, I also don't like these mylin notifications popping up all the time. So let me quickly switch that off. The notifications here. And I think another typical one is line numbers in editors. It's a very controversial topic, so there will never be a preference in Eclipse, a default value that fits all.
Because I hate them.
Okay, I'll switch them off for you. So once I say OK here, you see all the changes have been recorded as preference tasks into our user Oomph model. And I can now decide to save it, and the next time Oomph runs in a different workspace, or again in this one, they will be applied to that workspace.
So you see in this user task file, there's one P2 task. I like to have VI in every IDE I install. We disabled it because their site doesn't work offline for some reason. We need to debug that. But it's an example of, you always have your favorite tools independent of what project you're working on. I'm addicted to VI. I must have those key bindings, so I make sure that's installed everywhere.
Yeah, this is a number of the tasks that we have implemented already. It's not the complete set. We are currently working on a discovery mechanism for more tasks, because this task meta model is extensible. You can write your own tasks, and you will be able to register it with us so that others can see, can find it and install it. Yeah, I think that was mostly the demo. Are we already?
Maybe give them a quick walkthrough of the Oomph setup itself.
Okay, you remember?
I think we have 5 minutes.
We have chosen to the Oomph project to be provisioned into the workspace. So the model that did that is also openable from here. So you see there is a tree where Oomph is the top level project. Then we call that streams. That is the same as in Git a branch or in SVN a branch, but it's a more logical concept. And you see there are tasks on all these hierarchy levels. And what we chose for provisioning is always the leaf, a stream of some project. But that will install all tasks that are inherited from here. And projects can be nested in other ones. So it's quite flexible for authors to specify what tasks should be run for their projects. And this is, yeah, you remember probably what you've seen on the progress page in the wizard. And remember, at any time you want, you can press this other button here. That is the manual trigger that you've seen on the slide. And it reconciles the model against the running IDE, sees what is missing, what is already there. And in this case, we have just provisioned it. It is just the tasks that do remote queries. So
you can imagine to update an IDE as typically, do I update the tools? I need to check those P2 sites to see if there are updates to the tool. And same with the target platform. Do those update sites have new versions of the bundles that I depend on?
Yeah, I think we come to the conclusions.
So there's a few sort of basic conclusions to this. One is, if you really want people to contribute to your project, you need to make sure that they can spend their time contributing to your project and not writing your wiki documentation and not following scripts that take them hours. You're better off making sure that they're started in a clean workspace, the test pass, they run, that is hooked up to Garrett so the contributors can show up, and in half an hour they can be prototyping something and committing it. And don't spend your time on documentation, spend your time on automation. Because if you think about what's in these scripts, they're exactly the manual tasks that you're expecting people to follow again and again, of go to this update site and select this thing to install and set this preference and so on. So better off to describe that as a model in a declarative way than to write endless documentation. And if you use this stuff yourself, these descriptions will always be up to date. You'll know when they go wrong because you're using this yourself to set up your own IDE, and you can share that with all your contributors. And the basic underlying point is all of this stuff's available today. We built this from existing Eclipse technologies, and this stuff's all in a Git repo. We have builds. If you go to that wiki site, it says where to download this stuff. There's some initial documentation on how to write your own setup tasks. And we're working right now to create setup tasks for some of the more sort of fundamental projects. Like I had one working with the older version for the Eclipse platform. With the newer implementation, we can make that more modular. So I have the goal that you can go through this wizard and pick all of the pieces necessary so you have the full platform SDK as source in the workspace and contribute to any part of the platform. So feel free to play with those links. There's a news group link there for where to ask questions, Bugzilla, where you can open Bugzillas, and following these steps you can contribute and commit to Garrett if you'd like to get involved. So we have a couple minutes for questions.